Welcome and happy Thursday. It's This Is Going Well, I Think, with David Cooper. I am David Cooper. It is This Is Going Well, I Think, the show where no one's listening. No one cares. That show where every episode's the last episode. Let me tell you a bit about today's show. In about 10 minutes' time, a very special guest, and one thing is for sure, they are going to offer to take off their shirt, to expose their chest. It'll all be very exciting. It's a cliffhanger. I'll tell you more about it in a few minutes. Will it be science man Dan Riskin? Will it be therapist Gary Dierenfeld? British person Tony? Or sexual health educator Samantha Biddy? Who knows? Salacious! Then ticks. I'm scared of Lyme disease. I stay away from ticks. When I'm in high grass, I wear long pants. But I got some bad news for you. A new disease is spreading by ticks. It's called anaplasmosis. And we're going to talk to someone who's probably going to give me a new complex about ticks to walk us through that story. Ticks, spooky, scary. Don't get bit. Also coming up later is Conspiracy Corner with Dr. Lee Kuhnle. There has been a very recent coup d'etat, an attempt to overthrow the German government, and the details of it are fascinating and laden with conspiracy theories. That is what we'll dig into with him. Man, today's going to be a great show. That is merely a small cross-section of the things you'll hear. Oh, Tony Five's going to be here, our foreign correspondent, for his Proverbial News segment. I got to shut up. I got to get on with it. It's going to be a great show. Take my word for it. But first, this. Last night, hopefully I tickled you with a story that a shocking number of people can orgasm from tickling. Maybe a way to improve your relationship. But tonight, another turn down an unexpected arousal avenue. House cleaning. You know, sweeping, mopping, tidying, laundry, the dishes, or as I call it, the dish laundry. According to a new survey, 69, yes, 69, I'm a child, % of Americans say watching their partner clean is in fact a major turn-on. And no, I'm not talking about polishing off that doorknob if you catch my drift. Apparently, according to the aforementioned survey, Gen Zs and millennials are all about the gift of a clean house. Forget expensive gifts, just grab a mop and voila, you got romance in the air. That is, twice as many women would rather sniff a fresh floor than a bouquet of flowers. Could pine sol be a new sexual pheromone? That I don't know, but the juicy tidbit comes from the Talker Research for Swiffer Unstoppables. That's the firm that did our research. Okay, it's junk science, but it's funny science, and they found that 60% of people are more likely to, quote, get fresh in a clean-smelling home. No wonder 82% scrub down their place before a date. Cleanliness is next to horniness. And if you and your partner share cleaning duties, you're more likely to stick together. 1 in 3 couples with similar cleaning habits have lasted over 5 years. So the couples that clean together stay together, or at least had fewer melodramatic, passive-aggressive fights about who's going to do those dishes. And on the flip side of this, a unclean-smelling home is apparently a deal-breaker for 2/3 of us, and 43% say they would bolt from a date's place if it smelled funky, junky, moldy, or stanky. More than 1/3 would even dump their partner if their home was consistently not clean. So if you're hoping for a long-term relationship, I don't know, invest in some Lysol? A clean home is also a major factor for first impressions. Surprise, surprise. Nearly 80% of Americans judge others based on the cleanliness of their home, which is to say dust bunnies might ruin your reputation. So if you want to get busy, bound chicka wow wow, start by getting tidy. Ding! That was the ding of Mr. Clean, I think. The survey found that those who clean twice daily are as likely to have sex compared to those who clean only monthly. So grab a mop, get moving. Your life may depend on it. Well, your love life. A national record has newly been set in politics in Canada. It's very exciting. Félix Antoine Hamel just made history in the most impressive way possible. God, I'm impressed with this guy. He got absolutely 0 votes in a federal election. Not a single soul, not even himself, because he couldn't vote where he ran. The guy is truly a unity candidate. Everyone agreed to ignore him. Hamel ran in Toronto as part of a protest against Canada's lack of electoral reforms. He was roped into this escapade by the longest ballot committee. And boy, did they live up to their name. With 84 candidates on the ballot, it was longer than a CVS receipt. I'm pretty sure voters got a workout just trying to unfold their ballots. And for those not familiar and those that do remember, Prime Minister Trudeau did promise to end the first past the post political system. But yeah, that went out of the window faster than your New Year's resolution. So the longest ballot committee decided to stage a protest. They made a point by jamming the voters' card with names. It took scrutineers so long to count votes. Legend has it they're still there today. But let's get back to Hamel. This guy's from Montreal. He didn't even live in Toronto. And the guy ends up with a big fat zero. No one in Canada has ever ran and gotten 0 votes before. What an achievement. Candidates have achieved 1 or 2 votes like the other ones on the ballot part of this protest. But I guess they must have had at least 1 or 2 friends or some very loyal pets. But Hamel, no. Zip, nada, zilch. If there was ever an award for the least influential person in politics, this man might win by a landslide. The candidate says he never expected to make Canadian history. Well, Felix, you did. It's not quite winning the Stanley Cup, but it is a story for the grandkids, and I am proud of you. But next time, try running for something a tad more attainable, and not like most forgettable candidate ever. So hats off to you, Hamel. Hero of nothingness, the champion of zero, the Zorro of zilch, the Nosferatu of nil, the Earl of empty. I can't think of any more puns, but in a world full of overachievers, it is refreshing to see someone truly excel at underachievement. Congratulations on being the first ever federal political candidate to receive absolutely 0 votes. And we go to Vermont, where the maple syrup flows, and so do the middle fingers. Our story begins with our hero, a man on a mission for a cup of coffee. His coffee maker broke, so he did what you or I might do, headed to Dunkin' Donuts for a fix. Little did he know that his quest for caffeine would cost the state of Vermont $175,000. Here's how he got the money. It's a chilly day back in 2018, and the man is driving home with the coffee that he purchased. He sees a cop, and he does maybe not what you or I would have done. He flips the cop off. But freedom of speech, right? Well, wrong. Sort of. He then sees the cop's dreaded flashing cruiser lights, and we enter the sergeant, a trooper with a, complex. The cop says he didn't appreciate the man's 1-finger salute, so he slapped him with a disorderly conduct charge. Maybe the cop didn't like the man's middle finger. Maybe it was a bit too perky. Maybe the knuckle was too hairy. But still, arresting someone for flipping you off, bad judgment, yes. Criminal offense, well, you'll see. So we fast forward 6 years later. Our hero, who gets arrested, acknowledges that it was bad judgment, but he's not giving this up. He doesn't think he should have been arrested, and so he sues the Vermont State Police. And yada, 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 the state police decided to settle this saga by handing the man $175,000. That is right. For the price of a middle finger, you could buy a relatively nice house in Vermont, or at least a very nice coffee maker. Meanwhile, the cop who arrested him retired on a, quote, disability claim, coincidentally just days before the settlement. Maybe the cop was allergic to freedom of expression. The police, of course, will not, as part of the settlement, admit any wrongdoing because, well, they're cops. Why would they? Apparently, arresting someone for offensive gestures is just like another day at the office. I don't know. But our bird-flipping middle finger man is now a reluctant poster boy for constitutional rights. He gets his settlement, and now the whole thing is blown up on social media. The dash cam video of his arrest went viral, which turned the whole thing into an online sensation, but for the cops, not the good kind. So here's my major takeaway. If your coffee maker breaks and you like flipping off cops, just make tea. If your coffee maker breaks and you don't like tea and you gotta drive to get coffee, don't flip off the cops. Actually, forget all of that. Do flip off the cops if you don't mind being manhandled, arrested, and then living to make a buck or two at a later date. And to any cops that might be listening, you might not like when people send rude gestures your way. You might find it offensive. But misusing your power, that's a crime, or at least cause for you to waste taxpayer money on a settlement. In just a moment's time, I'm very excited to have here a naked news reporter, but more importantly, somebody who's recently got a lot of attention because she's been showing off her chest at the major landmarks in New York City. So I'll dig into the how and why of her cans showing up at places like Times Square. Oh, and she's the one who threatened to flash the show. She's the one who may or may not expose herself. Am I looking forward to this? Mostly I'm terrified, but you're going to love this. Equality for the genders through nudity. I'm here with someone who's been flashing her chest at New York City's tourist hotspots. She says for gender equality. She also says if you don't like it, don't look. I absolutely love it. I'm here with Eila Adams, your favorite girl next door, a naked news anchor and writer-producer of Flex Appeal, the hottest naked workouts. Eila, thank you for joining me.
Woohoo! Thank you for having me. And I'm surprised you're based in New York and you didn't see me flashing my everywhere.
I did not see you flashing. I did see the article. So in some sense I did. And especially the tourist spots in New York. Forget about the nudity. I don't even want to go there. You got to be psycho to go to like Times Square. It's awful over there.
I guess, yeah. So next time you'll have to tell me where your neighborhood is and I'll try to make a stop there.
Downtown, it's grimy. All right, not important. Let's get to the motivation behind your decision to flash at these tourist spots in New York City.
Well, obviously, I'm not naive. I don't think that I'm changing the world with my flashing. The article was a clickbait piece, and it worked.
They always are, right? Every time I talk to someone from a study or anything, it's clickbait.
Of course, it did work. Like I got a ton of new fans. I got a ton of people talking about me. Of course, it would be great if a woman read the article and was like, maybe I'd like to try that. But do I really think that it's going to work that way? I don't think so. I actually got a lot of hate from a lot of women online.
It's wild. I remember, what was it, at the Super Bowl where it was at Janet Jackson with the boob, and it's like America can tolerate such awful things on television. Violence, dysfunction, murder stories, but the second we see a nipple, outrage. Think of the children.
The things that people wrote to me online were like sickening. Like I have had my share of online bullying before, but this is probably some of the worst I've ever received. Somebody literally said, my boobs were worse than 9/11.
I mean, that's creatively mean. Yeah.
What the hell is that supposed to mean? Like, where are people's minds? Like, it's so shocking to me. But what I wanted to get out of it was exactly what happened. I got traffic to my websites, and that's all that mattered. If I happen to empower some women along the way, that's great too.
It's legal in New York what you're doing. There was a court decision in '92. Look at this. I did research for this interview. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, at least about the advocacy side of things?
Well, it is. I do believe that it should be legalized for women to be topless, just as wherever men can as well. Do I think it's the most important issue at hand? No. But sure, that'd be great if women could have equal rights in that way, to be able to sunbathe topless or whatever they want to do. It's not only that I only flash in legal places either. I flash in many illegal spots as well. It's more about the thrill of it because my fans enjoy that kind of content with me, and I think it's funny. And that's my motivation behind it, just that I find it to be entertaining. And yeah, if you don't like it, don't follow me. Don't look. I also am very careful to make sure that I'm not like bothering people with it. I do it very sneakily. So most people don't even notice that I'm doing it.
So it's just really the photos. You do it on the sly. It's legal. Yeah. You're not really bothering anyone in public. And then the people on the internet, if they want to see it, they can. If not, don't search New York City boobs in Google.
Yeah, don't search Eila Adams either if you don't want to see that kind of content.
You are also a naked news anchor. I remember I must have been 18 or 19, and I was walking. I lived in Toronto at the time. I was walking by a park, and I was not a cool kid. I'm also not a cool adult. I didn't see a lot of naked people.
Yeah.
And I walked by a taping of Naked News, and it was just a wonderful moment for me without sounding too disgusting.
I wonder if it was me. I've been on the show for 15 years now, and it's also legal to be topless in the streets of Toronto.
Now I go to Burning Man. I go to Hot Springs with my girlfriend. I feel like I'm not your best audience if you want outrage, because I just think nudity is normal. And
isn't isn't nudity great? And to have that perspective about it is such a healthy attitude as well. I think that people who have such negative feelings towards it really need to look at themselves in the mirror, especially look at themselves naked and be like, why am I so angry about this? Like, it's your own body.
Get a hobby. Like, sign up for a class.
Yeah.
Volunteer at a soup kitchen. Do anything. You're wasting your time. You're wasting your energy. But Naked News, tell me about it. How did you get involved in it? And what is it for those who don't know? I know it's pretty self-explanatory in the name.
So it's literally a news program where the women are reporting naked. So we do sports, entertainment, regular news. I also write a naked workout segment called Flex Appeal. It's been around since 1999. This year is actually the 25th anniversary, and I have personally been there for 15 years.
All right, back to the flashing. I've always wanted to say that.
Well, you kind of have to be comfortable. Well, actually, not kind of. You do have to be comfortable with being topless in public as a naked news anchor.
Here's a question for you. Why get interested in being naked in public in the first place?
So as soon as I turned 18, I was like, I need attention. Let me get naked. I want some money. That's basically it. So I started nude modeling, did some nude acting roles, like playing a stripper in a movie and things like that. And then I did a naked workout video, and then I did a naked cooking show. And the producer of that naked cooking show told me about Naked News, and I auditioned, and I was right out of college. Like, I was 21 years old, and Naked News offered me a full-time job with benefits. And I was like, you know what? Maybe this is a career choice for me. And yeah, I've been there since 15 years.
It's a relatable story. You graduate and you think to yourself, I want attention. I want money. I'm sure that's like everyone's experience. You just went about it in a fun way.
Yeah. I wish that I had some like deep story, but I don't. It was literally that simple. I did not think, like, I went to school for something completely different. Like, I didn't go to school for journalism or anything like that. I'd never thought that I would be here this long, but here I am, and I love it. I can't imagine myself doing anything else.
Have you ever encountered anything strange, surprising? I know we got to the hate side of things, but I'm thinking more quirky, funny, bizarre, weird, while either flashing or taping a segment live in public.
Oh, well, we do have a nude beach that we shoot at pretty often here in Toronto, and we'll get people that will start jerking off when we're trying to shoot, like in the background, and we'll be like, sir, can you just like move to the side like a couple of feet? Sir. Yeah, that kind of thing. It's mostly just a lot of people will just stare for so long. And it's just like, take your photos and move on. Really? That exciting?
Once you flip the script and breach that public nudity thing, people really do feel entitled to behave however they want.
Yeah.
Whether it's at a pride parade or some kind of protest, maybe it's a naked bike ride, people just lose their sense of common decency.
I just did the World Naked Bike Ride. It's funny that you mentioned that. And that was probably my first event where I was actually really uncomfortable. And I'm normally super kind and generous with fans, and always will take photos because they're fans. Like, I'd be nowhere without my fans. But at this particular event, there was so many clothed men just there to be creeps. And I was honestly being like, you know what? I don't want to take a photo with you because you are really creepy and you're like trying to grab me. So I had to just ask people to step like close to me, but not like put their arm around me. And that was one of my first times actually being that restrictive, because normally I'm like, hey, I'm comfortable with nudity. But yeah, that was one of the first events that I was like, you know what, these people are creeps.
Yeah, I know you're laughing it off, but the fact is people are behaving, they're not respecting your boundaries like consent. It's gross, you know, smarten up.
No problem with taking photo with any of the naked people, of course, because they're naked and they're in the same boat. But it was more so the clothed people who were just there to be, for lack of a better word, creepy.
I wonder if the people were nude in public more often, it was more normalized, people would be less creeps because it would be not a big deal.
Well, that's the whole thing with why so many women don't take advantage of this legalization for women to be topless, is because of the men's reaction. So if it was more normalized, like in Europe, I'm sure that it would be a completely different story.
Have you ever faced any kind of legal challenges for what you've done?
I took a topless photo at Epcot, which was, of course, very illegal. And I posted it online, and I got a lot of hate after the fact, but I'd already left Epcot. So it's not like anybody could do anything afterwards.
I feel like going to prison in Florida. If I could pick any state, Florida might be my last choice.
So once I got the attention from it, and people were starting to like at Governor Ron DeSantis and at the like Florida police and stuff, I was like, oh, am I going to have a problem? But no, I've even been stopped at the border once, and they like went through my phone and everything like that. But I never was not allowed to go into the U.S. But yeah, that is something to be to think about in the future.
Wow, and you think you were specifically targeted by customs for what you've done online?
Well, not me personally, but content creators in general.
Interesting. Any piece of advice for folks who are feeling shy, repressed, but really want to get out there and get naked in public for the thrill of it, for the to show people they can, to make it easier for the next person who wants to get naked in public? Any piece of advice?
Spend time naked at home, and then slowly work your way to a nude beach and maybe a nude resort. And yeah, you'll be so much happier once you are comfortable with your body. And really, the nudists, yeah, some of them don't have the best bodies, but they don't care. That's why I love nudists.
Eila Adams, she's your favorite girl next door. She's a naked news anchor. She's a writer, producer of Flex Appeal, the hottest naked workout. And she's been flashing all around New York City. I'm sure you can look her up online. Eila, what a pleasure it was talking to you. Thanks for going over this with me.
Thank you, David. Do you want me to flash you before we go?
I mean, man, you can. I'm going to get in trouble, but why not? Okay.
Okay. No, I won't get you in trouble.
Nah, I mean, okay. You know what? I got Google. I'll figure it out if I need to.
All right.
Thanks, Eila.
Bye.
Just when you thought ticks, what I got to worry about is Lyme disease. Bad news, there's a new disease in town called anaplasmosis, and it's making appearances around Canada and the northeastern United States. We're going to talk to somebody from public health to get the inside scoop about these ticks and whether you should be worried, how to spot them, what to do if you think you were bit. And if we're really lucky, you might watch me end up with a new horrific neuroses about ticks. Lyme disease, something you might worry about if you live in the Northeast, but there is another tick-borne disease that's on the rise. It's called anaplasmosis, and it sounds terrifying. I'm here with someone to discuss. She is the Chief Field Studies Research Scientist at the Public Health Agency of Canada's National Microbiology Laboratory. Her name is Dr. Heather Coatsworth. Heather, thanks for talking to me today.
Yeah, no problem, David.
I have what's called empathetic hypochondria. So the second you start describing a disease, I start to feel like I'm having it. So just don't mind me. I have a friend recently diagnosed with Lyme. She caught it early, but Lyme disease is no joke.
It's not.
And you get it from ticks. Do you want to tell me a little bit about Lyme before we go on to this newer disease?
Yeah. So they're both bacterial pathogens, or caused by bacterial pathogens that are passed on by ticks feeding on you. Usually over 18 hours is the feeding time that's needed for either of these two bacteria to be transmitted. And Lyme kind of has that characteristic, we call it a erythromigrans or bullseye rash. So it kind of looks like a target on your body at the site of infection. And then with Lyme, you're going to get your general flu-like symptoms, which is the same as anaplasma. And Lyme, the unfortunate thing is you can get commonly reinfected and then kind of have those long-term symptomologies as arthritis or kind of neurological symptoms.
Well, I'm terrified of ticks, even the ones that don't spread diseases.
Fair.
How does it work? Is it because they're feeding on the blood of you and then another animal, or is it that the disease just kind of lives within the tick all the time?
So a bit of both. Largely, most of these pathogens are acquired by the ticks feeding on reservoir hosts or animals. Largely, those are small mammals, and then as the ticks grow, so do their hosts. So they kind of grow up and feed on bigger animals. So they can be things like deer or moose or elk as they get older. But most of the time, the ticks are grabbing those pathogens from the animals and then feeding on us as the next host.
My whole body's itchy right now. Okay, anaplasmosis, what is it? Is it dramatically different than Lyme? Is it in the same category as Lyme? I'd never heard of it, admittedly, until I read about it today before talking to you.
Yeah, so they're both bacterial pathogens. both bacteria that are going to be transmitted by that tick, but they infect your body quite differently. So Lyme's going to chill out in your lymphatic system, which is why you get kind of those arthritic symptoms, why you get the skin rash directly on your body, whereas anaplasmosis is your typical bloodborne disease. So it's going to infect white blood cells. But similar symptomatology of general malaise, so general flu-like symptoms, fever, and then long-term effects can be respiratory failure, and it can be fatal if left untreated.
Oh, the fun stuff. Does it respond well to treatment, or is it more like Lyme? The longer you have it, the harder it is to treat.
So it responds super well to treatment, and generally you don't get reinfected, and you don't have those kind of long-term symptoms that you do with Lyme.
Got it. You mentioned 18 hours is how long a tick feeds on you before transmitting it. So if I pluck the thing off me 17 hours and 59 minutes, I'm kidding. I mean, if I get it off my body within a couple hours, is there a higher chance of me not contracting the illness?
Yes, that's kind of the rule of thumb is the longer it's on you, the more time the tick has to kind of feed on you. The fun thing with ticks is they're a bit of regurgitators, or they're puking a bit in you at all times. So the bacteria actually lives in the gut of the tick, whereas things like Powassan virus that can be transmitted in about as quick as 15 minutes of feeding actually live in the salivary glands of the tick. So that's quite similar to when you're thinking about mosquitoes biting you and how quick that transmission can happen. Ticks and their bacteria live in the gut, so they take longer to get out into your body.
Wait, they feed on you, they barf inside to you, and then they infect you. What a rude insect.
They're actually not insects. They're arachnids. They have 8 legs. So much closer related to spiders than they are to other.
I'm an arachnophobe. You've just given me, you've made me go from scared to terrified.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, no. I don't even know what to say. I don't even know what my next question is. I'm scratching my whole body. This disease, anaplasmosis, it was only recently made a nationally notifiable disease in Canada. Not sure what that means, but I guess that's the country upgrading it to, hey, pay attention to this.
Yeah, kind of just exactly that. Yeah.
Is it a relatively new thing on your radar, or has it been known for a long time? It's just people are getting it now.
It's been known for a long time. We just haven't seen a large number of cases. So with Lyme, we kind of saw a huge expansion over a slow period of time. I'm not sure exactly how old you are, but I didn't grow up with ticks in my backyard.
16? 17, 18. I'm 38, okay? I'm older than I look.
Okay. But I mean, the ticks that transmit these bacteria didn't really arrive in Canada and even in the US until the early 90s, late 80s, in very small numbers. So a lot of these diseases have taken a bit to kind of establish in the population, especially in the animal population. And Lyme kind of came with the first wave, and now Anaplasma kind of has a few focal areas it's kind of distributing from. But we've known about it, and there have been cases since the early 2000s. We're just kind of finally seeing those cases kind of hit a critical mass and increase really quickly.
So you mentioned it's in Canada. It wasn't there in the 90s. Where are some of the regions in Canada and the United States where people are most at risk?
So in Canada, you're going to be at those kind of Lyme endemic high population provinces of Ontario, Quebec, and Nova Scotia. And in the US, it's going to be most of the northeastern US. So yourself in New York, that's a wonderful place to acquire Anaplasma.
In Manhattan, there aren't any trees here. They cut them all down.
They found ticks in lots of urban areas in New York. So
great. Fantastic. At first it's the cockroaches, then the rats, now the ticks. Fantastic. Wonderful interview. So happy about this.
Exactly. You're welcome. Yeah.
Now, are there specific environments where I'm more likely to get it? I'm not necessarily talking areas, but can I get it at like a baseball park? Am I more likely to get bit by one of these things deep in the woods, playing in a river? Like what sort of areas should I avoid? And if I'm in them, maybe wear, I don't know, pants?
Yeah, so typical tick prevention of long sleeved, kind of tucking your socks into your pants, and then wearing the same kind of protectants that you'd be wearing if you're going out and dealing with mosquitoes. So insecticides like DEET work really well against ticks as well. Generally, we've seen larger numbers of these ticks in forested areas and areas with high grasses. We're seeing more and more ticks in urban areas. Just because there's a lot of small mammals and interfaces in those urban parks with things like squirrels and rats and chipmunks.
Now I'm worried for me and my cat. How is this happening? Are these an introduced species? Is it just a natural spread of disease? Are there environmental changes? Like, why now? Why the sudden spread of this illness?
So nail on the head with that last point there. It's mostly climate change. So the environmental conditions are kind of ripe for these ticks to come into Canada and slowly move. The idea is that they're moving at about 45 kilometers a year, northward and westward in Canada, and that's about the same rate that you're seeing in the United States as well. And it's also partially due to urbanization. So as we encroach on some of these areas that animals have traditionally lived and been there for a long period of time, we're now kind of interacting with all the things that those animals have been interacting with for a long period of time.
So how best to fight it? I'm sure better medicines, better detection. Is public education a big component to this? What are your best recommendations for us to sort of mitigate this problem and make sure fewer people get it, and when they do get it, they get the treatment early?
So the easiest and best way to start off is try to avoid getting a tick bite as much as possible. So that's either pre-treating your clothes so you can spray them the night before if you know you're going on a hiking trip with a chemical called permethrin. You can also buy pre-treated clothes now at a variety of different like hiking stores or outdoor stores. Wearing repellent when you go outside. And then the largest thing is just being vigilant when you're outdoors. So doing tick checks before you go somewhere, maybe midway through if you're taking a lunch break, and then after you're back, check your whole body, get a friend, a family member, someone you love to check you over, take a quick shower, throw your clothes in the dryer. Kind of these general prevention tools are the best immediate way to get rid of those ticks or prevent yourself from acquiring a pathogen. Long term, we're looking at vaccines as an option. There's some phase 3 trials happening in the US right now. So hopefully that will come to market in 2026. So that will be for Lyme in particular. And then, so public education is a huge piece of it, is really being tick aware and then making sure you're going to your health practitioner when you have symptoms as soon as possible, since treatment works great if given early.
Well, I like the public education component, and honestly, you're a good sport for talking to me. That can't have been easy. I'm not fun to talk to. Heather, thank you for going over this new tick problem and Lyme and all of it. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, of course. Thanks much, David.
Dr. Heather Coatsworth is the Chief Field Studies Research Scientist at the Public Health Agency of Canada's National Microbiology Laboratory. All right, you know him. It's our foreign correspondent, Tony Five, and he is going to join us from England for some proverbial provincial news. Tony is going to give us all those important news stories from the most mundane and boring places in England, and you're going to laugh along with him while he does it. We are here with Tony Five, foreign correspondent out of London, England, who narrowly survived disaster yesterday. Tony, you were live on the scene reporting when your phone cut out. We thought we had lost you due to an electrical outlet that literally had no effect on anyone and was no problem at all. But people could have died. Tony, welcome.
David, it was an ordeal, I believe they call it. It was hard work. It came on probably about 2 hours after we spoke. I did wonder whether I'd got all of my information out to you about where I'd hidden the treasure.
No, you were trying to get the treasure information about steps for me to be successul. I don't even know what you were saying, but you just cut out. It was a dramatic ending, and I know you're really proud of that fucking joke, aren't you?
It would have been brilliant had I really had a treasure chest full of, like, I don't know, Jay Leno, Howard Stern, all of the good ones, all of the greats.
You're going to trap Jay Leno and Howard Stern in a chest?
In a chest, so that when you open the box, that they could imbue you with all their radio and presenting prowess, David.
Wow. Just wow. I mean, I would have wanted like Craig Ferguson or like...
Oh, he's good.
Letterman.
Arsenio Hall?
Arsenio Hall's okay. Letterman's probably my favorite.
I like Letterman. He's a good guy. I like his big beard now. He's cool.
Yeah, he's got a scary looking beard.
He's got a scary looking beard. I like him though. He's a very funny chap.
I agree.
But yeah, so it all came back on. Now back to normal. We got power again. It was the film I was thinking about yesterday was The Purge. So where everybody on one night of the year goes out and kills each other. Luckily, nobody died last night. There wasn't any old people, going mental in the streets. There was a couple of looters though.
Great. Okay, well, you're in a small town north of London. I guess a suburb is what you would call it. And along with that theme, of course, breaking news in your neighborhood the other night was the power outage. I thought we would do Tony's Proverbial Provincial News, where you share the stupidest, most irrelevant, most insignificant stories from tiny townships all around the UK.
Yep. So I live in a place called Letchworth, and it's a village rather than a suburb. So London suburbs are what we would call the area. So I'm guessing, I don't know, what a suburb of Brooklyn would be, Compton, whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm Compton, right? So I live outside of London, and the county I live in is called Hertfordshire. So London is surrounded by counties, and I live in Hertfordshire. So I picked, there's two stories, which one was completely ridiculous. I see it all the time. So when you drive through my town, my village, there's an aquatic shop, sells like aquariums and fish and so on. And this guy has got a really sun-bleached, god-awful Finding Nemo outfit. And he's always prodded it up in front of his shop. It doesn't look anything like Nemo. It's basically, it looks like a long sock with white and orange stripes with a fish head on it, right? And it's been, because it's been out in the sun maybe for 5 or 6 years.
Wait,
right?
you get
and everybody
sun
knows
in England?
it.
You mean for the 5 days you got sun, it was bleached?
Correct, right? And the top story of yesterday, because there's another top story today, is that somebody stole it.
What? Okay, it's a clownfish costume?
Correct. A clownfish costume.
Does the owner, or does he pay some poor chap to don it? Like, is anyone wearing the costume?
Right. So the two things are, I've never seen it being worn, apart from once, about 4 years ago, when that whole shop opened. And it must be so hot inside, because there's no open holes for it. So what he does is he sticks it on a bin. So this thing must absolutely honk, because it's on a bin, right? So all of the fumes are inside this bin to make it through. So you can Google it. You can type in Letchworth clownfish outfit, and you'll see a picture of it. Hopefully, it will come up on the Comet website.
Is this part of a wider social commentary about rubbish bins taking our jobs? They're coming into this country. They're
Correct.
getting into our clownfish costumes.
Correct.
And they're taking our jobs.
Correct. It's all about migration, if I'm honest, David. We don't want clownfish. We don't want to bring the values in. We don't like pescatarians here, David.
Now, are you going to deport the rubbish bin along with the costume? Should it be found to, where was it again? Rwanda?
Yes. So we're gonna send the bins to Rwanda. Hashtag bins to Rwanda. And basically, it will cost approximately £2.5 million.
Oh, that's cheap. I thought the government was estimating 15 trillion pounds. For those who have no idea what we're talking about, the other week we spoke of a story where the British government is trying to deport migrants and refugees to Rwanda, but instead of doing that, they're just giving the Rwandan government lots of money to be ready for the migrants, but actually not sending any except for one.
Correct. And there is basically, we've got a big election next week, 4th of July, another big day. Something else goes on the 4th of July, but we're having a big election here. And since the whole policy started about 2 years ago, they have only sent one person, deported one person, which again, the clue's not in the title. They paid this poor guy to go back. So he wasn't even forcefully deported. They paid him to go to Rwanda.
And
so this
he
guy's
went
loving his life.
voluntarily. He wanted to go. Honestly, this sounds like the deal of the century for the Rwandan government. They're just like, sure, give us money. We'll take your migrants. Oh, by the way, you're not going to send the migrants? Great. We'll take your money. We'll take the housing complexes you build because you guys are racist idiots. I love it. I'm happy for the Rwandan government, to be honest.
Me too. They're considering they had a huge genocide that was famous. It was a famously genocidal country. You know, they had films about it.
Yeah.
Why on earth the English government thought, that's a good place to go? That's a good place to send people. That's going to look good in PR.
Well, I think a little bit of rebuilding, a little bit of money can go a long way in stabilizing a government recovering from a tragedy. So honestly, this should be framed as British government donates to country struggling and helps it build housing projects for its own citizens. That's the story.
Forget about the migration element. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. I mean, don't we want a government that's like kind and helping those in need? Like, they should pitch this as a charitable story, not as a we're going to deport people who aren't from Rwanda to Rwanda. But back to the clownfish story. So the thing got stolen. Do the police have any leads?
No, because they can't walk fish. They can only do that with dogs. So at the moment, with the fish, it's a very strange tale. No one, I mean, it's not like whoever stole it is going to get any money for it on eBay. They're not going to walk around it. I just don't understand. It was obviously a prank by some lunatic, but where they're going to go with it, I have no idea.
Next story in Tony's Proverbial Provincial news is as follows. ...
Oh, mate, this is fantastic. So there is a car in the local area driving around. So this story is about a guy's car who has got notes in the window that people don't like. This is how petty we've become, and this is front page news. So a guy in his car has got vaccinedeath.com written on a bit of paper. He's also got cash is king, cash is freedom, and I don't believe in the COVID. In the COVID, which I quite like. He's giving it like a person.
What always gets me about these people, and libertarians do this too, and I'll explain what it is before I say what I think about it, which is sometimes what I do, and it's a terrible way to be a broadcaster, but money, the concept of it, the central bank, everything to do with cash is the citizen's relationship with its government. The currency is provided and printed by the government. And part of the worth of that currency is the citizen's obligation to pay taxes in it,
Correct.
Laws regulating its use. So in some sense, they're saying, like, I love law and I love government by saying cash is king. But then they're saying this other government thing, they're controlling us. It's the same with libertarians. Like, they hate government, but they like to drive their big trucks on roads the government paves.
Correct.
They like to fill it with gas that the government regulates as a certain mix of...
And subsidizes. Yeah.
And, they benefit in so many innumerable ways from the government, but yet their basic position is, I hate the government and everything they do is wrong. Look, I think the government has a lot of problems, whether it's Canada, the United States, the UK, tons of problems.
Rwanda's great, though. I'll be honest with you. Rwanda's banging. At the moment, it's the place to be.
With the UK government sending money to Rwanda to deport people and then not actually deporting them, Rwanda's got a fighting chance of making a buck or two for British people being idiots. And I love that.
Correct.
Having said that, I think, I don't know. There's ways in which I trust our government. You got to trust them to be themselves, I guess. And
yeah, I mean... Speaking of that, yesterday I had some issues with a car, so I went to a mechanic, and while he was fixing my car and playing about, we just started getting in conversation. This guy was on the verge of conspiracy theorist nutcase. He started going on about something called the Bilderberg Group. Have you heard of this?
No, I'm looking it up right now.
So Google the Bilderberg Group. So this is the conspiracy theorists, this is the Mecca. This is the people that control the world, the New World Order. The Bilderberg Group. Have you heard of them now?
Yeah, it's like an off-the-record meeting of countries, probably to soften Cold War tension and collaborate. And, it's just government officials meet and they don't announce it because, there's a line from the Pentagon to the Kremlin. Just in case shit hits the fan and nukes are about to fly, there is
Correct.
a phone number that a U.S. official and a Russian official can just talk. They don't advertise these things, but they're there.
No.
It doesn't mean there's a huge conspiracy.
Well, this guy, apparently everything in the world is not controlled by Putin and Biden or whatever. There's people above him who nobody knows about.
It's always the Illuminati, and as a Jew, for whatever reason, they always blame me. And I'll be honest, we are an annoying people, but we didn't do that.
No, but see this, again, maybe it's an American or Canadian thing where you always tell me that it verges towards Jewish people, whereas in the UK it's the other way. They don't mention Jewish people. It's just the people.
The people.
And it never gets into the anti-Semitism.
Okay, well, people are upset by this car's bad messages, and that made local proverbial provincial news with Tony 5. Tony, thank you. This has been a joy recording with you today.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Now I'm going to go and find that car and give it a good kick in.
If your car needs a kicking, Tony comes a knocking.
Smelling of chicken. I'm on fire today.
I hate you. Up next, Conspiracy Corner with Dr. Lee Kuhnle, who is a conspiracy theory expert. Look, there was a lot going on in terms of political upheaval in Canada and the US back in late 2022. So you might have missed this, but there was a coup d'etat attempt in Germany, and the details of it are horrific. Sound interesting? Lee's going to walk us through it in just a minute on Conspiracy Corner. We are here with Dr. Lee Kuhnle for Conspiracy Corner, a segment where we talk conspiracy theories with experts. And by experts, I mean Lee and his peer Nathan. Today, we're going to talk about the 2022 German coup d'etat, and we're going to contrast that with the Illuminati. Ooh. Lee, welcome.
Thanks for having me, David. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Say no more.
Okay.
No, you said okay. Say nothing. We're going to wait to get to the conspiracy thing. You are a professor of political science.
I am.
At Humber College, correct? Now you can say stuff. Come on.
Yes. It's all right.
And there's a little website called ratemyprofessors.com.
Oh, no.
And you have several ratings, 166 ratings on this website. Are you aware of this site? Come on, you got to be.
I actually am, because I use it as so there's a bit too much inside baseball, but back in the day when I was an undergrad, my school used to put out what was called the anti-calendar. And it was a rating that was done by students of their professors. And I would choose all my courses based on that, because a great professor can make a boring subject interesting, and a crap professor can make a great subject boring. So I didn't really go as much by subjects as I did by the rating of previous students of professors. And I figured this would be a helpful resource to students. So every year, or at the end of every semester, I'm like, hey, if you wouldn't mind, and I do try and be very honest. I'm like, look, it doesn't matter if you say good or bad things, but if you could rate this course such that it would be helpful for the next generation of students coming through. So I am a little bit involved in the background of that rating.
All right. I'm going to read some of these ratings because, first of all, you are amazingly rated. The people like you. The people really, really like you. That, or you've figured out how to create 166 different distinct email addresses and spamming this service. We can't know, but the students love you. My heart was so warm to read this. And I will say, I agree that you can't always rate a professor based on like their accolades. Or, for example, when I was at University of Toronto, there's a famous problem in computer science. It's the P equals or non-equals NP problem. I'm not going to explain what it is, but there was a professor there, Dr. Steve Cook, who came up with this problem. And so I'm like, I got to take a class with this guy. And he taught one undergrad class. He was more concerned about his graduate students. He didn't give a shit about the undergrads. It was a fine course. But then you get the professors who are like not yet tenured yet. And these people really care, and they really do a good job, and they're amazing teachers. So I don't know. You can't judge a book by its cover, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, you're right. And it's true because this is also the problem that graduate students have with the famous profs. You go to a university because there's like some absolutely famous professor over there, but that professor generally doesn't have any time for you. And what often happens is precisely the not yet tenured profs, the younger people coming through trying to make a name for themselves, are actually the ones where you get to like really learn stuff.
There you have it. Okay, without further ado, I'm going to embarrass you. Here's rating number 1. He's a chill, cool guy. Would wish to see him again.
That's sweet.
You're chill and you're cool.
This is actually too much flattery. Like I can't.
When people do this to me, I get in physical pain.
No, I'm like turning purple. I'm not even red anymore.
Dr. Kuhnle is a great professor and definitely good at his job. What I love the best about him is that he is very passionate and knowledgeable about the topics he teaches us, which I think greatly improves the atmosphere in the class. Definitely recommend taking his course! Yeah, just one though. I mean, I would have liked to have seen 2 or 3. Professor Lee is very nice and greatly cares about his students. I like that this person didn't split his infinitives right there. He also enjoys his job a lot and loves talking about conspiracies, which makes his classes even more enjoyable. I could go on, but the people love you, and I just wanted to make you embarrassed by reading this.
Well, it is, though, like really one of the things that makes the job that I have so rewarding, because it's precisely that engagement with students. And Nathan and I teach courses that are not part of their core education, right? Like they've signed up to do something else, and then they take our course as a kind of what almost seems to them, I don't know, like a filler or something. And so you have a room of rather skeptical people, and it's such a pleasure to win them over and show them that there is something out there that they might not have experienced or known about. And so it's really rewarding, and it makes me really happy when they say nice things about me. To be totally fair, I did once delete one comment, and I kind of wish I hadn't.
Wait, you can delete them?
No, you can contact the administrator of the website if like somebody is being kind of outrageous. And I regret that I did this. But one person did write, "Stupidest guy I have ever met. Don't take his course."
I mean, you can't argue with that.
So, you know, there are other opinions out there.
I was looking for students who said you were hot and handsome and a DILF. That's a dad I'd like to, well, I didn't get any of that. I was surprised, actually. Or do you delete those as well?
No, I wish there were some, but there was one, and this probably is not something I should be admitting to, but we used
Yes, it is.
No, we used to have students do these reviews also on paper. That's organized by my institution, and so they would, they'd fill in like what they thought, but then there was a comment section on the back, and the comment section said, "What did you like about this course?" And okay, look, this is super embarrassing, and I'm totally regretting even.
For people who can't see you right now, which is everybody, you are a handsome man, I gotta say.
Well, no, but this. I really wish I had actually started down this path now.
I am so glad you did. Yesterday, I had 2 doctors from Harvard say on this show, so I mean, this is the venue for it,
right? But this is silly. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Now I've started. I have to finish. So it's what did you like about this course? And the student, who of course is anonymous, don't know who they are, said, "Super hot prof." And then it said, "What would make this course better?" And the student wrote, "Shirtless prof." Which I just thought was like so outrageous.
You have
and
to
funny.
listen to the people, Dr. Lee Kuhnle.
But then I pinned that review up in my office. My colleagues had to look at it for like a year and a half.
They could have had it better. They could have seen you with your shirt off.
Which is not something you want to see.
But I get what you're saying about the nice kind of like when you're really in this for that nice message, not necessarily just for the students saying nice things, but to know that you really had a connection with these people.
Yeah.
They connected with the material. They felt that you cared about them. I mean, that must be a nice part of the job when that happens.
Students is what makes the whole thing worthwhile, honestly. Like it's this is fun. The writing is fun. The researching is fun. But then when you spend a semester or 2 with a student and you really get them interested in something, it's just the most rewarding thing that I could imagine out of a job.
There needs to be more teachers like you. I feel like a lot of profs, they're there for the research. They're there for, to be in their field, to do whatever. And like the classes to them and the students to them, especially undergraduate students, just a burden, and those teachers suck. Okay.
We got to move on to something that's not about me.
Do we? I mean, we got a minute left.
No, please.
No, but those nice moments. I remember before I ever was on commercial radio, I was just a hobbyist at this point. I did a show.
Okay.
Where I was kind of like being a troll, and I kept playing the same bad song over and over and pretending like I wasn't going to. And then at the last minute, I would play a clip from Sunglasses at Night by Corey Hart.
Yeah, totally.
I just kept on like teasing, and I kept on making stuff up about Corey Hart, and it was so stupid and so repetitive. But I had a comedian in the studio with me, and she was laughing, and she kept on begging me not to play the song, and then I would, and we were in hysterics, and the people who worked at this radio station were angry with me, and one of them came in and on air told me to stop. And the more I did it, the more it was just one of those moments, those stupid moments. A month later, I get an email saying my wife, it was at Burning Man. She said, this guy sends me an email. He's like, "I couldn't go this year because my wife is getting treatment for cancer." So I was listening to the radio station at Burning Man on the internet, and I was playing it in the room with my wife, and I was laughing. And I was in hysterics, and my wife was screaming at me to turn it off, and I wouldn't. And the nurse got involved, and I got in a big fight with my wife. And I just want to say thank you. It really made missing Burning Man this year okay, and I really felt connected, and it made dealing with the struggle with my wife a little bit easier.
Wow.
And that was the first time anyone ever reached out to me, and I still remember it to this day. Like, I was in tears, and I'm like, this guy gets it. Obviously, he was like joking about the fight with his wife, but
no, but you're right. Like, it's the human connection.
Yeah.
And it's funny because, I mean, you probably have, we don't see any audience.
No.
You don't know who's out there. And you don't know if we're just talking to each other.
Well, I assume that. And then if anyone else is listening, it's icing on top. We're going to talk about the 2022 German coup d'etat and the Illuminati in a moment. It's probably Conspiracy Corner with Dr. Lee Kuhnle, but we haven't got to conspiracy theories yet. But I promise we will. And you're not going to want to change that dial. I've been saying that every 10 minutes on my show. So stupid. We are back with Dr. Lee Kuhnle. It's Conspiracy Corner. Lee is a professor of political science at Humber College in Toronto, Ontario. Lee, we're going to talk conspiracy theories. For those who don't know, what happened on the 7th of December, 2022 in Germany?
It was a real shock, I think, both to Germans and to the rest of the world. People woke up to the news that there was a coup d'etat, an attempt of a violent overthrow of the German government by a group within it that had armed itself, that had plans. Now, obviously, everybody gets very nervous when, Germans are arming themselves and about to overthrow the government. There is a certain history that is obviously kind of comes to the fore with that. And when you think about who these people might have been, I think it was surprising, again, in and outside of Germany, that they were actually really like members of society that were not obviously disaffected. We had a former parliamentarian. We had, a real estate agent from the aristocracy. We had top-ranking people in the police and the military. Some of them had retired. These were not the kind of, ball-shaved neo-Nazis or the kind of what we might assume as these super radicals. These were people that, although their ideology was super radical, were not the kind of people that a lot of people thought would do something like this. And it was a really big shock. And they had, it was also in a sense, and it's a question about really how serious it was. Certainly it was, when you look deeply into it, they were not going to manage to actually do it. But they might have actually, caused some real damage. They had depoted weapons in the German parliament. They had gotten weapons inside the German parliament.
Wow.
And were planning to storm the German parliament.
And then pick up the weapons and continue on with their merry way.
Yes.
I mean, anytime a German lights a match near the Reichstag, I get worried. I mean, this was...
Well, exactly. And they were going to kidnap... Oh, I should say, for both of our safety, that these charges are currently before the German court. So nothing has been conclusively proven. And so really we should say allegedly in front of everything.
Allegedly. This is what happened, allegedly.
This is what happened, allegedly. The evidence is pretty damning. I mean, there's emails, there's weapons, there's confessions, there's all this kind of stuff, but it has not yet been proven. They were allegedly going to kidnap high-ranking German politicians. They were organizing cells, as many maybe as 300 armed commando cells throughout Germany that were going to, at the moment of the Reichstag putsch, going to rise up and engage in terrorist activities, sort of try and take down the electrical grid, cause a mass power outage, again, like the kidnapping, stuff like this. It was a scandal and it was a shock. And it was, December of 2022, December 7th, is when the news broke. And the news broke because that's when the police started their search and seizure raids.
It's wild that this happens in such a Western European country that we think of as relatively stable since, I don't know, the early 90s. I feel like there was so much going on with political unrest in the United States at the time. The news kind of gets buried in North America. But this was a huge deal.
Yeah, and it actually has a lot of connections with what's been going on in the United States. The German movement is called the Reichsbürger, but if I were to translate that into English, probably the closest is the sovereign citizen movement.
Yeah.
And so the storming of the Capitol building on January 6th, that had actually been preceded in Germany 4 months earlier by sovereign citizens storming the Reichstag. This was a different event, but it was the same kind of milieu that was getting, armed and militant. Now, their storming of the Capitol, of the Parliament building at that point ended up being more of a photo op. But I think this is kind of mapping onto a lot of the discontents and frustrations that are happening all over the place, not just in Germany.
So what are some of the stated goals or the assumed goals of these groups?
So in the German Reichstag or Reichsbürger case, the sovereign citizen, it's an amorphous group. And they have a bunch of different factions, obviously, and they have different opinions about what needs to happen and what the problem is. The group that was organizing the armed overthrow argued that Germany, since the First or Second World War, again, it depends who you listen to, is no longer an actual state, that the real state was the monarchy that existed between 1871 and 1918. And then after the Second World War, their argument is that Germany was occupied by foreign powers, no peace treaty was signed, and therefore Germany became a kind of vassal state, a corporation run by especially the Americans for their benefit. And so they disavow the entire edifice of the state. They disavow the police, they disavow the laws, they disavow the Constitution, they disavow all of it. And they claim that the monarchy of 1918 is when it was dissolved.
The Kaiser.
Exactly. Is actually still the legal entity that Germany, that is Germany. That's the real state. And the head of this movement, his name is, now I have to give you the German, Heinrich the 13th, Heinrich the 13th, Prince Reuss. He was essentially, allegedly, going to insert himself as the new monarch.
Ties to the Illuminati? Are these conspiracies that some of these people are believing, or that the sort of German equivalent of QAnon is believing are really running the show? This nebulous group of elites, this oligarchy that is sort of higher and more powerful than all governments?
So again, when you look at the ideologies here, there's a lot of overlap. I mean, again, they're not just insular groups, they're talking to each other, and they are, some of them, one of the military leaders is a guy named Maximilian Eder. He was, espousing QAnon ideology, like basically verbatim. He was talking about Satanism, child sex trafficking, the subterranean war between good and evil, all this kind of stuff. And so what we discover in these movements is often that there is a lot of overlap between different conspiratorial milieus and ideas, including that there are secret societies that are running the world. But for my purpose, or our purpose, I was thinking it's an interesting contrast to look at, say, what conspiracy theorists sometimes assume is happening with a secret society like the Illuminati, which is supposedly running, pulling the strings behind the world government and really in control of a lot of what is happening in history. And then an actual secret society that actually tries to take over the government, and what an utter disaster it is. And the two don't sit well together. And I think that the German sovereign citizen movement can function almost as a kind of critique of this idea of secret societies. Because it's like, okay, so let's see this actually play out. Like, let's see these people were, the sovereign citizens, were well-connected, had money, were, I mean, the way they got the arms allegedly into the German parliament was through this former parliamentarian, Brigitte Malsack-Winkemann, who retained her passcode to the parliament afterwards. So they actually had access into the parliament, like they were connected in a way. So I think that, like, looking at how an actual secret society actually tries to take over the government is a form of a critique of the myth of a secret society that is sort of running the world behind the scenes. When you actually put it to the test, it's kind of, I don't want to be too mean or too reductive, but it's kind of laughable and ridiculous.
It's this idea that there's this fiction and then reality comes to play as a the fiction of the Illuminati is mirrored by the reality of this group trying to overthrow the German government. It's another case of this. This is something we talked about last time we spoke.
I know. We did do that fiction reality thing last time.
I mean, it's just funny that these concepts, these wider, broader concepts come up and pop up and kind of remodel in different areas, whether it's current events or whether it's like a view of the way things happened during history. I wish we had more time, but I am glad we spent the first 10 minutes just talking nonsense. Because after all, if this show isn't a show about nothing, I don't know what is.
Well, it's always a pleasure to be invited if we talk about nothing or something.
Lee, I'll leave you with this from ratemyprofessors.com. Lee is a funny and caring professor. His lectures are amazing and interesting. Another one, he was a great professor, would definitely take one of his courses again. Lee, I would definitely have you on the show again. Thanks for talking to me. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks as always for having me on.
Dr. Lee Kuhnle is a professor of political science at Humber College. That's French for college, maybe? No, it isn't. Here's what's coming next. Look, we all have problems with work stress. We think our employers suck, right? But what's wild is we think other people's jobs are worse than our own. There's a gap between how bad we think our own jobs are and how bad we think other people's jobs are. It's kind of a very curious finding. And the takeaway is things may not be as bad out there as we think. So, my upcoming guest is a sociology professor who did that research, and he's going to walk us through all of that. We're here to chat stress in the workplace, and we are here with a professor of sociology and the Canada Research Chair at the University of Toronto. His name is Scott Schieman. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
You have an article in the Globe that's titled as follows: "We have a problem with work stress, but it isn't quite what you think." I added the word "quite" in there, don't know why. Let's start here. Let's talk about the study into workplace stress. Do you want to give me a high-level overview of what that was?
Yeah, so back in 2019, before the pandemic started, I launched a large national survey, representative survey in Canada of thousands of workers. And my main interest was just to try to get a sense of the quality of work and economic life in Canada. And I was going to repeat that study every year for the next decade. Then the pandemic hit. That kind of changed everything. And I went into the field more regularly and just have collected now about 23,000 cases, again, broadly representative of the Canadian working population between 2019 and the present. And so the piece that I wrote up in the Globe with one of my collaborators, Paul Glavin, is really one small slice of our interest in trying to understand what people think about their own jobs, how they evaluate the qualities and conditions in their own working life. And then we decided to try to get a sense of what people think most other workers are experiencing. And the motivation I can talk about, but the motivation for that briefly was just the very negative narrative that came out of the pandemic, and especially the Great Resignation in the United States, just really sort of trashing work's reputation. And so we really wondered and sort of felt that it was overblown, but we wondered whether people really believed it. So the main takeaway there is just my job is fairly okay, but it's really, really quite bad out there. So that's the broad overview.
So that gap between people's specific complaints that they know of their current job, whether those complaints are valid or not, whatever, but what they're dealing with, what they're reporting they're dealing with versus what they think everyone else is dealing with. You're saying that gap is vast. What do people think everyone else is dealing with?
Well, so again, I mean, none of this is to minimize or trivialize what people are personally going through. So the concrete example here that we reported on in the Globe is that roughly about 30% of all workers, again, broadly representative, 30% of all workers say personally they experience high stress at work often or always. So it's a classic question that's been used going back decades, just a general question about overall stress level. So that's 30%, and that's probably too high, and it's a problem we should address. But the perception gap, or glitch we call it, is that when you ask them the same question, but you ask them what they think most other Canadian workers, or we did this in the US as well, most other American workers, it's shockingly high at 70%. Think that most other workers are experiencing stress often or always. And down the line, on question after question about pay, quality of management relations, possibly quiet quitting, turnover intentions, you name it, on every single indicator, there's a gap between what people personally say and what people think is going on out there. And the gap always favors the self. So it's always worse out there. And you might ask the question, well, to use some sociological jargon, that's a downward social comparison. So people should feel better, right? They actually don't feel better. And our theory on that is because it kind of creates this morass of badness that's out there, where it makes people feel like, I might be doing okay, but given that work is such a central part of life, it doesn't feel good that it's so bad out there. And so that's one theory why it doesn't have sort of a protective effect the way at least the notion of downward comparisons would suggest.
That's interesting, some of the outcomes of this thinking. And I love that you call it a glitch. And I don't think you realize your work actually proves that we're living in a matrix or a simulation. It's an amazing finding from a sociological study. No, but what do you think the contributing factors are to this glitch? Why do you think people are looking at their own work saying at a 30% rate, hey, this is pretty stressful, but then looking at everyone else and saying they got it much worse?
Well, that's the puzzle that we're trying to solve. And so again, right now we have some theories, and one prominent one, of course, blames the media. And we've done an in-depth analysis of all pieces in major media outlets in the United States from once the Great Resignation started, kind of early in 2021 through 2022. And you really see this uptick in just negative headlines. Like, this is a take this job and shove it economy, you quit, I quit, we all quit, I could go on. And the headlines are actually fascinating just on their own. I feel like writing almost like a sociology of headline writing. But often if you look at the pieces, the images that go with them are like, people celebrating, quitting their jobs, and kind of like a TikTok moment going viral. And suddenly, TikTok videos became data points for reputable, credible media. And that was concerning to us, where it's like, okay, that's not a nationally representative sample. Yes, some people are rightly upset with their bosses. Some people have bad bosses. But again, it sort of lost, to answer your question, I think it sort of lost the sense of proportionality. Like, yes, a slice of the population is always thinking about quitting. A slice of the population is always stressed out. It also raises the question, well, shouldn't some stress at work be normal? Otherwise, the opposite could be where you don't feel challenged, you feel bored, and you don't feel stimulated. And so that's one of the theories. It's harder to prove it. However, we are kind of doing an analysis where we're continuing to follow now that the Great Resignation is over. And you do see some of those perception glitches, especially about satisfaction, at least in the United States, starting to close up a little bit. And that's probably a good thing, especially for Biden, in the sense that, if people are feeling bad about other people's jobs and see a sense of like discontent out there, that might also spell political trouble. That's one theory. The other is just more broadly that people like to think about other people complaining about their jobs. And so there's sort of a individual optimism, but social pessimism, negativity instinct idea. But then you could ask a good question is why doesn't that circle back onto people's own conditions? And I think people know their own conditions, but they don't know really what's happening out there. And so it's filled in by negative narratives or complaining. And so those are just a couple of the ideas that we have, but there's a lot of work to do to figure out what's going on.
I want to latch on to what you're saying about media narratives being negative, potentially contributing to this perspective that things are worse out there than they are. What would the advantage be, or what would the motive be? I know this is speculation. I'm not asking you a scientific question, but could it be that like big media's a function of rich, powerful people, and they want to keep us working, and if they scare us, we won't make lateral moves or quit our jobs, and then the jobs will be filled and wages won't go up and no one will ever quit? Like, could that be a reason?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not a media studies person, or I haven't looked at this, but if, it's the classic kind of, if it bleeds, it leads, or conflict or anger gets attention. I mean, I noticed, I wrote a piece for The Conversation. You can go and check it out, like about, busting the anti-work myth. Most people like their bosses. Almost no one read it because it's like, it's too positive. And I recently just wrote one that took a different angle, which is a scary angle, which is the level of powerlessness in Canada has gone through the roof. And it's got the most reads I've ever gotten. And so, like, I don't know, that's purely anecdotal, but I think it's an anecdote that kind of makes the point, which is there is this kind of like, if it bleeds, it leads, or conflict sells, or doom saying, for some reason, we're attracted to that. And even in my research, when you ask people why, so we've asked people, why do you think so many people are less satisfied than you? So we've actually presented people with the truth. And one of the most common answers is, A, they either see it or read it kind of in the media, the negativity, or they just absorb most of the complaining about work. And I guess if you think about it, few people aren't going to be like, hey, I love my job. I'm so happy with my boss. I've got, such supportive workers. Or they do say it, but people don't really pick that part up. What they pick up is like, oh, my boss is such an aggressive jerk. And for some reason, that seems to appeal to us more. In terms of the broader picture about, the journalists, I mean, I think that's another question. However, it is funny because I think the Wall Street Journal Derek Thompson's written about this in the Atlantic. The Wall Street Journal had a piece, satisfaction is higher than it's ever been. They had that in like March of 2023. And then in November, they had another headline that was like, why is everyone so unhappy at work right now? And so, same journal. I think they even cited the same study. But like those kinds of things have made my head spin, where I'm like, I'm not really sure what's going on, but it is sociologically and culturally fascinating the way that we're thinking and talking about work right now.
Are there any takeaways? What do you recommend to the average worker who kind of is disillusioned with what he or she thinks of the industry? Is there any recommendations to the average Joe worker?
Recommendations would be like, try to just step back and maybe have more conversations that have both good and bad. That's one of the things that we recommend in the piece that we wrote for the Toronto Star, which is a lot of times silence or even just focusing on the negativity really gives people a skewed perspective. Again, none of this is to say ignore the bad stuff, but just recognize that there's much more positives to work. And one of the other last takeaways is it does seem like sometimes that negativity can really, really obscure or cloud all of the other positive things that might be going on, even in your own work experience. And so I think just in general in life, having a more balanced perspective about just how bad is it and how many people are experiencing it and what is the other side of that conversation.
The next article you publish that has a positive interpretation of the data here, I want you to title like so-and-so positive workplace thing. Also, Trump and Biden did this and you won't believe what happens next. See if people click on it.
Probably not, but I like that you like the headline because I actually wrote that we have a problem with work stress. And usually you don't get to write your own headlines, but I wrote that and it's like I'm sort of learning the tricks of the trade, right? Like how to get people's attention.
It's a modern day version of don't touch that dial. All right, Scott, thanks for talking to me. I appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Scott Schieman is a professor of sociology and the Canada Research Chair at the University of Toronto. In just a few minutes, it's, quote, Junk Science Week for the National Post, a paper in Canada. And before we get into this article I want to reference, there was a study that shows that the outcomes in medicine when you have a surgeon are in fact better when your surgeon is a woman versus a man. Seems straightforward, right? Well, to the article, it's a critique of this. And quite frankly, I don't agree with this. So I'm going to talk to this guy who came up with this critique. I don't really agree with them, so I hope to have a spirited debate. Maybe things will get ugly. Stick around to find out. It's Junk Science Week for the National Post, and there's an article running that reads like this. Does sex really count in the operating room? We're going to dig in with its author. His name is Peter Shawn Taylor. He's the senior features editor at C2C Journal, and he's the only Queen's University's economics master's graduate to become a cowboy, which is honestly the best description I think you could ever give for any guest. Peter, welcome to the show.
I'm glad to be here.
So do you want to briefly explain the main findings of this study as it relates to the performance of female versus male medical surgeons?
Yeah, there's a fascinating sort of mini literature starting to develop coming out of Canada using Ontario provincial data. Canada is sort of ideally situated for large-scale studies of things like surgical performance because we have a public sector monopoly on our healthcare system. So there's a sort of a single payer. And so you've got all this great data all coming through a central funnel, so to speak. And so we've seen this piece looked at 3 individual journal articles using Ontario data, very large data sets, 700,000 to 1 million surgical procedures. And when they looked at the sex of the surgeon and various outcomes, they discovered a statistically significant benefit to having a female surgeon. One found that if you had a female surgeon, the risk of post-operative complications or even death was statistically smaller than if your surgeon was a man. Another found that the healthcare system was charged more, ended up costing the healthcare system more if your surgeon was a man versus a woman. And another found that as the number of female surgeons and anesthetists at a hospital increase, the rate of post-operative complications falls. So all the 3 separate studies all showing basically the same thing, that female surgeons seem to be better than male surgeons from a patient's perspective.
You mentioned healthy skepticism in your article, and I'll bolster your argument before you make it with this. I know, as a former scientist, causation is not correlation. Now, I am interested in your take on the kind of healthy skepticism in the interpretation and the conclusions of this data. So what did you make of this when you read this study?
Well, these some of the media have glommed onto this, saying this proves that the patriarchy is incompetent and that diversity, gender equity needs to be pushed further because women are actually better at this than men. I did the results. I'm a sort of naturally skeptical person, I guess. So it's, show me, prove to me. And on first blush, these are studies in well-respected journals. The data sets are very large and high quality, so that's something in their favor. And they seem to be using sophisticated statistical techniques. So on the surface, there's not a lot that sort of ticks the junk science box. But there are some factors going on here that make you pause a little bit. One of them is that when you start to look at the kinds of surgeries that are being studied, men are doing almost all of the cardiac surgery, neurosurgery, orthopedic surgery, all the really complicated stuff. Female surgeons are doing general surgery, gallbladder removal, etc. They're doing breast reductions, plastic surgery. So there's quite a big gap. In one of the studies, 95% of the neurosurgeries were performed by men. 95% of the cardiac surgeries were performed by men. So this is a big a gap here between the kinds of surgeries done by men and women. The studies all claim that they correct for this kind of complexity. I talked to some statistical experts. So you can't really look under the hood. You have to take the author's word for it that they corrected for all these complexities. They say they did. But I kind of like a second or a third opinion on that, because these are really big differences. Clearly, your risk of complication and the cost to the healthcare system is going to be different if you're doing neurosurgery versus if you're doing breast reductions. And I just want to have that sort of double checked, I guess. That was the first thing that my skeptical mind twigged on.
Okay, even if I concede for your desire for a second or third opinion on taking the scientist's word, you're saying that the correction they made to adjust for the fact that different kinds of surgeries were being performed by men and women, that they corrected for it, but that correction is opaque to you? Am I misrepresenting you, or that's what you said?
Yeah. And I don't pretend to be an expert on statistical methods. I did talk to some statistical experts. It just feels like I'd like to have a second opinion on that, especially when it's 95% of the neurosurgeries are being done by men. It just there may be some other self-selection things going on. It just seems that the possibility of confounding factors when you have that kind of dichotomy deserves a second look.
Fair enough. Even if I concede to that, which I'm not sure that I do, but even if I do, if men have the monopoly on, your words, the complicated stuff, not mine, wouldn't this be an argument for addressing the gender gap anyway, to make it more equitable and kind of have an even distribution of men and women performing these other kinds of surgeries that are higher risk? Then the data may well likely match. There won't be, women are amazing at this, but we'll have still addressed this kind of systemic problem that men are getting all these complicated stuff jobs, which I imagine are the better paying jobs.
Well, sure. I mean, for the past 30 years, we've been trying to do just that, and it hasn't happened. And so that leads you to the second question, I guess, is that women have been in the majority in medical schools in Canada since the 1990s, and they do not go into surgery at the same rate that men do. Women appear to prefer other specialties. In one of these studies, only 7% of the surgeons were women. In the other two studies, 13% of the surgeons were women. So the pool of available doctors to become surgeons is more than 50% female, and women are not becoming surgeons. And the small number that do choose certain specialties and not other specialties. So the question that then comes is why is that? There's lots of debate. You get the surgical world is a patriarchal military hierarchy that women find it hard to break into. That's one argument. The other argument I find somewhat more persuasive is that surgery is very arduous, very difficult, very risky, very time consuming, and women doctors seem to prefer part-time work and an easier workload for becoming mothers, etc. There's all sorts of reasons for that, but they do seem to make their own choices to not go into the neurosurgery and the cardiac surgery, etc. So we've been, society has been trying for decades to get a balance in those kinds of specialties, and it hasn't happened. So you're left with sort of questions there.
I've seen this in my former field. Before I went into radio and podcasting like an idiot, I worked for a Fortune 500 company as a computer scientist, and then a manager, and then a senior manager. I studied software engineering in undergrad, and my class was more women than men. But when I finally got to industry, I observed men hiring men, high-end jobs going to predominantly, males. I watching a company hire only men, watching female candidates come in and saying, I don't want to work at a place that's all men. There are other reasons for this that sort of fall under that first bucket you presented, But I did find your characterization of it a little extreme, like this patriarchal. I think it's more at a mundane level, and I don't think you can say, hey, at least anecdotally, you can't say, hey, because there's an equal amount of graduates of both gender or perhaps even more women, that it's just magically going to be better in industry. It's that addressing of the problem of the gender gap has to happen at each step. I didn't see it happening in my field. I can't speak for the medical field, but sure. Yeah, I guess I just don't see it quite the way you do, having worked in a field watching that exact same thing with a higher number of women than men graduating, and then an industry that self-selects men.
Well, I mean, my experience is in journalism, and journalism started off as a male-dominated field, and it's I've had plenty of female bosses above me, so I don't know. I've witnessed. My lived experience is perhaps different than yours, but I've been in an industry that was accused of being a patriarchy and now is no longer. And I would suspect, I don't see the data but I suspect that journalism schools are probably majority women. So it's a pool question, but it's also a choice question. And I, off the record, I talked to some one female anesthesiologist, and she said, the hours for being a surgeon are crazy, and women just don't like it. So that's what I've got to go on. But we've been trying for 30 years, and so that raises the issue of how do you operationalize this if women are better at surgery, but women don't seem to like to be surgeons. How do you operationalize this information?
I think you have to look into the why. That's unfortunately all the time we have, but I've enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I know, right? Just when it gets good. Peter, I've enjoyed the conversation. It's an interesting take, and I've enjoyed chatting with you.
Okay, that's great. Thanks a lot.
Peter Shawn Taylor is C2C Journal's senior features editor, and he's Queen's University's Economics Master's Graduate Programs. It's a lot of apostrophes. Only person to become a cowboy. That is our show. Thank you for listening to it, and I will stop talking like this in just a few moments. I'm going to stop now. I'm not going to do any more weird voice stuff starting now.